On this episode of the Ryles Report, we're sitting down with Boyah J. Farah, the author of America Made Me a Black Man. And he's going to give us a historical context of what it's like to be an immigrant to this country, a Somalian immigrant, and then have to encounter the African American caste system that exists here in this country. America Made Me a Black Man. Let's move forward.
Welcome to the Ryles Report, where we add historical context to life, love, and politics. The Ryles Report is now in session.
Boyah, welcome to the Ryles Report. Today, we are going to add historical context to becoming a Black man. I had an opportunity to read your book, and I must say that, I learned beforehand that Somalian people are known, or the country is known as a nation of poets. And your writing style for America Made Me a Black Man was certainly lyrical and poetic in the telling of your memoir and the telling of your story. And today I want to share because most African Americans have never been to the continent. And we rarely get an opportunity to meet people from the continent, no matter what country they come from. And Somalia, most of us, unfortunately, only know you all through the movies that America puts out, like Black Hawk Down or Captain Phillips with Tom Hanks. So we know you as pirates, and we know you as Islamic zealots that shoot down American helicopters. And so, our view is so very limited. And to know that you are a country or a nation of poets, that you are probably the next Hadra we in terms of the way you write. And that is a poet, perhaps pronounced his name wrong, his nom de guerre wrong. But I want you to share with us your journey from Somalia and what brought you to this country. And then, later on in the show, we're going to talk a little bit about current affairs and some of the things that as a Black man, I'm certain that you have learned. But to give context to the book, immigrants don't necessarily come to this country with a full understanding of the African American experience. And the one thing you and I have in common is melanin. And that melanin in this country brings with it a host of issues that you have to negotiate. And your book, I think, very well details how you realized or began to negotiate those issues through your experience coming over here. And as I understand it, you came here after civil war or during civil war in Somalia. So explain that to us and how you got to this country and what being a Somalian in America was like when you got here.
Beautiful. First of all, I appreciate the inviting me to your show. It's wonderful, wonderful to be here with you. I just returned from the motherland, so it's wonderful to reconnect. My country, Somalia, I was born in Somalia. My country went to civil war in 1990. I was a young kid. I'm the first son in my family. I have two sisters older than me. However, the first son is put on most responsibility, including defending the family. And age is not really relevant in Somalia. When you're 8 years old, you're expected to be a man. And in Somalia, you're also expected to revere poetry and words. Legacy is more important than death. To die for legacy is the highest honor. To die without a legacy is probably the lowest honor a man can get. So as a young kid, all I wanted to do is to honor my mom and my younger siblings. So we zigzagged. We left Mogadishu, went to refugee camps, saw a lot of tragedies, saw a lot of wars, and then ended up in Kenya in a refugee camp. We stayed in the refugee camp for a year. In July of 1993, at the height of the Somali Civil War, we got sponsored, came to Bedford, a town outside of Boston, which is 99% white. I went to a white school called Bedford High School. That's where I learned the language from there. What I carry at the time about African Americans is exactly what you carry from the Africans. When you look at the Africans from this end, You never know there's a city called Nairobi that's like mimics New York. When
Right.
I came here, I didn't know. All I had images was really horrific. I was actually afraid of black people, which really means I was afraid of myself.
I got a question for you then. Where do you think that came from in terms of why you were afraid of black people? What sources? Was it media? Was it what was it that led you to have that fear?
Media projection. The media projects black African Americans. At the time, there were no immigrants as thugs, lazy people, people that are given opportunity that they don't want to take advantage. So as an African, you're like, you're in heaven and you don't want to take advantage. Only when you get to the heaven, you actually see yourself as a black man. And when I actually even calling the book America Made Me a Black Man, it's not talking about the actual color, skin color. I was born
Right.
black, I'm African.
Mhm.
It's talking about the pain that one has to endure to be called a black man. There's
Right.
enormous pain, a pain while driving, a pain being the first, last to get hired, the first to be fired, the harassment in between. There's so much pain that came to it. So
Right.
it's a metaphor for pain when I
Mhm.
call myself America Made Me a Black Man. And it
Right.
did it through experiences, small,
Mhm.
painful vignettes that I went through for many, many years. And I thought I blamed myself for saying I should get more degrees, I should get more degrees. The more degrees you get, the more painful life becomes for you as a black man in America.
Right.
And that's what
I
forced.
noticed in your book, you found a friend in it must have been middle school that you went through high school and college with, and he kinda was, your sensei if we were Chinese and gave you some of the heads up on things that you just were oblivious to because, you know, I've been to the continent, I've been to Haiti, I've been to Jamaica, and when everybody looks like you don't necessarily have a reference point when racism is hitting you in the face if it's not so overt as them calling you the N-word or letting you know that the reason you're being mistreated is because of your race. It's nuance. We do need to go to a break. On the other side, I want you to tell me about your friend that helped walk you through being black in America. Give me 1 minute. We're back, and I want you to go ahead and tell me how Derek walked you through and kind of put you up on game for the things that you were encountering that you were oblivious to as a black person in Massachusetts, which has its own history.
Well, it's one thing to watch a movie and cry about it, and there's another thing to be the actual character that goes through the
Mhm.
pain. Derek could not tell me what war is like, because I've seen war, real bullets penetrating body. Derek was a knower of America. And I was the newcomer, the denier of American brutality because I never really experienced it. So Derek used to tell me that our lives, the destiny of a black man belongs to the white man. And I never want to give that credit. I just didn't like that. I hated that. But what he was talking about is the experience that we're going to go through together will get us, will make us brothers. Pain made us brothers. So every day we end up working together. We used to go to lunch together. We used to struggle together. I never actually shed tears because my culture doesn't allow me. A man to shed tears to man to get even. I go to war with anybody who makes me tears. It's just a culture. But I saw him cry. And I never understood it from the beginning that how can a man cry on an invisible enemy, an invisible, psychological warfare? But what I didn't know is one day that invisible disease would enter my body and disintegrate inside of me. And that's exactly what happened to him. So he was telling me what America was like, how it's gonna destroy us. And I was
Mhm.
telling him, no, if we can get an extra degree, our lives will be better. Let's work harder, just like the Chinese or the Indians. Well,
Mhm.
the machine is set up to destroy our lives, and
Right.
that's what we discovered together.
Well, you talk about in the book how when you went to high school, it was a integrated high school, primarily or predominantly white students, and you describe what I think is the quintessential black experience is that although the school was integrated, the black kids ate with the black kids and the white kids ate with the white kids. And you kind of began to understand black culture through Derek and through music because the music and the You like Tupac, from what I understand. That poetry was one of the ways that you were able to get through high school and then some of the experiences that you met in college. Tell me how that changed you.
Yeah, from the beginning, may she rest in peace, there was Miss Parker, a teacher, a black teacher, a medical program director. And she will pull me into her office and tell me, "You're not African anymore. You're an African American. Here's a book." She gave me a Malcolm X book. And she gave me many, many other small books that actually tells the tale of African Americans. And of course, like I said, it's harder for me to imagine what the pain that African Americans going through because my pain is different. It's about war. It's not about psychological warfare. So she was the first person who introduced me to the black struggle. She's the first person who told me about Tupac and what he's talking about and the pain that his family has gone through. I was in the beginning. She was the real teacher about America.
Mhm.
When I say the real teacher about what awaits me.
Right.
And then little by little, I get to experience that. Even when I was there, I went to a small shop. I used to love pizza because I didn't have pizza. I didn't know pizza. I never had tasted pizza before. There was no pizza in a refugee camp. So when I got to Bedford and I tasted pizza, I loved it. I used to save money. And I remember one time going into a pizza shop and asking for a slice of pizza, and the guy's telling me the police is outside. And for me, not knowing exactly what that means. And he could have done anything to me, but there's no way for me to know because I do not know. I'm not aware of the pain of the struggle here and how it can damage you. So little by little, I get to America begin to teach me vignette by vignette until I call myself Black American, African American. America turned me into its own, people that it destroys.
When you say the pizza's on the outside, he wanted you to eat your pizza outside versus inside the restaurant?
No, he was saying that he didn't imagine that I could actually buy it. That he thought
Okay.
I shouldn't enter the shop. I came in, I was in a line, I'm ready with my money, I wanna buy pizza. And the guy is just
Right.
saying, "We're gonna call the cops on you, get out."
Right.
And even before that, there was stories that was deleted. I used to love wearing like, Tupac wore baggy pants, things like that. I remember going into a place where they sell, hats, and the guy telling me, I don't wanna buy I don't wanna sell you anything, get out." And just calling me actually names.
Mhm.
All those little things you dismiss it, but of
Right.
course, it becomes part of you. It changes you.
Well, I know you detail for us in the book a couple of instances where you encounter police. And I have a book coming out, The Immortal Jim Crow, a system that still haunts us today. And I detail experience that my son had. Tell me about those experiences. And first, how did you realize that you were in danger versus the protect and serve that they try and portray police to be? But unfortunately for black people, it generally is more you better protect yourself or you might get served something you don't want.
The most highlight of the one I get to remember again and again, is actually more than one. Once upon a time, I was driving a car and I went to a soup and there's a store, Stop and Shop where you buy the grocery. I parked outside. There was a bank named Fleet Bank, and I guess somebody robbed or did something and ran away. And I was parked right outside. A police came to me and try to arrest me. But my mom told me that you shall never be arrested. You're the first son. You cannot do anything stupid because the rest of the five siblings that are younger than me will mimic you. And so at all costs, you cannot get arrested. So
Mhm.
I told the cop, please take me to the bank. I cannot do this. I have a bad leg. One of my legs bad. I limp. There's no way I can run around. I can run. There's no way I could do stupid things like that. He said no. I said take me to the bank because I'm right. The bank is right there, adjacent to the summer shop. So he walked me into the bank. He stood there. A lady came out, an Indian lady, and she said it's him. My heart dropped. I started thinking about prison, and then I started sweating and saying, "Please, it's not me. Look at me again. Like don't do this." And the guys behind me, it's incredibly humiliating way. A white lady came out and she said, "It's not him." So I thought the cop was gonna let me go after that. So I stepped outside, really upset. The cop follows me And he was like, "Who else was driving your car today? Take me to your house." And at that moment, my warrior side came out, and I wanted to fight him. Thank God it didn't escalate it, but I really wanted to fight him. So I lost my mind after that, cussed him out, I wanted to damage him. But as soon as I called him racist guy, you racist, or you trying to do this to me, da da da, he kind of back off.
Mhm.
So he knew what he was doing. Maybe he was doing it from subconscious level because he got used to treating black people like that. But as
Right.
soon as I stood up for myself and he saw me really upset, he changed himself. He kind of back off. And I went
Well,
home that look up the yellow pages. Back then, they didn't have the computers. I called a few lawyers, and the lawyers told me, "You're black, yes. Are you calling them from home? Yeah, there's nothing. It happens all the time." And
right.
that's what the story ended.
You know, I'm curious, how are you as a child taught, because in the book it does, you display amazing discipline in very trying circumstances, circumstances that a lot of our young people don't they don't have the discipline to be able to restrain themselves. I think I didn't learn that kind of discipline until I became older, and it's almost as if you are thinking throughout the entire time you are being confronted with overt, abject racism from police, from authority figures, and you slow your mind to be able to deal with the situation versus losing control, which I think is probably a little more common in this country than it is in a lot of places. What is it about your family that taught you that kind of discipline? And I want you to answer that question on the other side of this break. Give me 1 second so we can pay some bills. Boyah, we're back, and I want you to go ahead and tell us, what as a Somalian child, what do your parents do? Because I think a lot of African American parents could learn from the type of discipline. Is it cultural? Is it where do you all get that kind of self-discipline to be able to calm yourself under extremely tense and what normally would cause people to have an outburst? How do you keep yourself cool, calm, and collected?
Well, it has everything to do with the culture. We're struggler. I am a twin with a pain. My whole life has been a struggle. So you're always when you are in a country that you don't belong. And
Well,
so
why don't you back up a little bit? You say
go
you grew up in a struggle. Tell folks about that because I think that
well,
we don't really have a concept for what you went through, brother. Tell us about it.
my father was a warrior, and he slept with the gun and ate with the gun and fought. And when I was born, my father prepared me to be the warrior that will one day carry his legacy. Somali life is not a life that stays still. That country is being run down by colonial power because of the location that we at. We are the Horn of Africa, the longest coast in East Africa, or perhaps in Africa. So therefore, every country wanted to conquer that land, just like Afghanistan. Alexander the Great went there, Genghis Khan went there, the Russians went there, the United States of America went there. The same thing is happening in Somalia. I don't remember any of my forefathers not fighting. So I was in line to carry the AK. I was in line to learn with pain, because when you expose boys for pain with pain, the boy understands pain and reacts and stay calm when necessary. So our minds are prepared to struggle and to put legacy before our bodies. What should I leave behind for the living? How will my daughter's daughter be looked at? How will my kids look at it? So I look at my father, even though my father has been away for a long time, as my role model. He was a warrior. He died with dignity, and I love him for that. But if he died without a dignity, it would have been a great bad legacy from him. I'm glad he died
Mhm.
with legacy. So we came from that pain
Right.
from the get go,
And
and
we
that's what
shared
I want to
we
see.
talked last night, and you told me the Somali, and I think that because I have lost a child, and a
Sorry to hear.
lot of my viewers and listeners are people who've likewise had tragedies such as the loss of a child, the Somali view of death, I thought it was quite unique and enlightening, and it may very well help somebody. Tell me how you all look at that.
Well, the way Somali life looks at death is the death is we're destined to die, and therefore, they instead of crying, you ask the person what they left behind. Did they leave children behind? They leave resources behind, and how do you divide that resources? And some goes to get blessing for the dead, give it away donation. The other ones, the kids to use it. Death in a Somali concept, it's something that is going to come, and therefore it's part of our lives. You never want to stop what you're doing because death arrived, because it was already expected. Every second of Somali life, you're always reminded. Every poetry reminds you, this is what's coming. Make sure you leave. If you leave nothing else behind, leave good language, words, leave smile behind, leave being nice to your neighbors, leave something beautiful, fight for the neighborhood, protect the weak against the powerful. Those are the ideas that you grew up with. So death is not the ultimate causer of pain and tears. It is what you left behind. So if you leave anything bad behind, then that is when someone has to shed tears for you, because now your kids are going to look up at you and say, my dad was not good.
And I'll tell you something else that caught my eye in your book is that when a person is in mourning, like your mother at the loss of your father, in Somali culture, you wear white.
Yeah.
In American culture, you wear black.
Mm.
And that has something to do with everything black being bad. And in your culture, why is it that they wear white?
Yeah, I mean, and that's also the struggle that I've had, that to be black, I never could understood that black could be associated with something bad. I just didn't, because cultural differences. Also in Somalia, we don't look at each other as color. We look at each other as honor, your honorable family. Those tribes that fight the most get to have the most. Those who defend against the land are the warriors of the land. So when those who are cowardice are looked upon as their daughters will not produce strong men that can defend the land. Or the reciters of poetry. Poetry can be a poetry that can be translated 10 years from today. Those who recited today, tomorrow they will look at it and say, wow, that guy was brilliant. Let us look for his bloodline and marry. So it's a completely a misunderstood culture. Somali culture endures, and that's what Donald Trump doesn't get it, or the West, or
So,
the white people.
so everybody wants to be Hadrawi. Is that it?
Yes.
I got it right?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
Hadrawi. All right.
Poetry defines where you are in the society. And when I was a child, my grandmother used to tell me, memorize few poetry so you can be a man and sit among the men.
Right.
Or when you're with your friends and the weak is picked on, can that poetry remind you to stand up for that weak? People do not even know, but before, when we had government, Somalia was destroyed because Somalia stood up for Africa. Every single poetry from my childhood was the struggle against colonial system in South Africa. I mean, every poetry,
Against apartheid.
Part-time, all Somali men wanted to fight in that struggle, in any struggle in Africa, because the language it hasn't been translated. And that's the very reason why that Somalia has been destroyed, because Somalis were the loudest in Africa in terms of the struggle against the colonial power. My own auntie was abducted by the British Empire. The struggle the Somalis have gone through, the Africans have gone through, is exactly the same struggle African Americans have gone through. And this book does well connecting the people in America and the people of Africa. It makes a bridge between the two, because our differences is the media.
Right.
Because the media portrays you somebody thug to me in Africa, and the media that they project from Africa looks at the Africans as nothing but naked, begging beggars and have malnutrition kids. That is not true. It's all projection of betrayal of bullshit media, not real.
Well, that brings me to the situation that our current regime in power, for the president who remained nameless, had some very horrible things to say about Somalis recently in Minnesota. And you and I discussed it briefly. And on the other side of this break, I want you to give me your take on on Minnesota and those that supported Trump and now are being deported by ICE. On the other side of this break, we're going to talk about Trump and his treatment of Somalis. So we're back now. Throughout social media, they have been talking about, FAFO for the Somali people that decided to, I guess, be the model immigrant and were supporting Trump. And we as African Americans knew that they would get what was coming to them by putting any trust in Trump. What are your thoughts on the folks in Minnesota who supported Trump? I think the day before yesterday, he called Somalis garbage and has sent ICE into Minneapolis and done everything to show you his true colors. Tell me what your thoughts are on those people and those occurrences.
Well, like I said, Somalis revere words more than an old man who's losing his mind, who grew up in a racist environment, who's been a racist all his life, and is still trying to practice at his age. At this age, you should be looking at something good, where you leave behind something good for the living when you're at
You're
that
talking
age.
about Trump.
Yes, he'll never understand that. In terms of the what he said, Somalis being garbage and all these things, the bottom line is they do not want black people to have a voting power. Minnesota has Somali people get together and they live in the same neighborhood, which means they now have a voting power, and now they can produce a congresswoman and they can produce a mayor. And in the history of America, they've always make sure that black people don't get together and vote and learn together and have a culture, an African culture in the American hemisphere. They always try to disrupt that. So the bottom line is that's exactly what they're trying to do. But it is the history is written by the passage of time. Somalis look at time in the long term. They don't look at today. They look at many, many years today. Like 100 years is probably short term for Somali life. And all this noise that he's making is the same episode that African Americans have gone through for years, or other communities. Haitians went through last time. And this guy wanted to obscure the reality of America in terms of economy, in terms of international, the way America is looked at now. It's really, really horrible. He's trying to manage the country like a reality television, where he's throwing it over and over again. It's not going to stick,
Mhm.
but he's going to try. 98% of the people are citizens.
Right.
Somali living in Minneapolis are citizens. So who is he going to deport? America?
Well, it really is. There is a group, and I know I'm probably going to get a little pushback on this, but there are a group of African Americans, and I see most of them as millennials, and they call themselves foundational Black Americans. And they really don't want anything to do with Africa or Africans, and they think that they can do it alone. And I have had this discussion with some of my friends because I didn't really truly understand what they were all about. And I knew that they were about reparations, and they want to make sure that the only people who are entitled to reparations in this country are African Americans. And as a person who was able to be a part of actually obtaining reparations as a lawyer for the Rosewood Massacre survivors, I know, and I think the Tulsa situation where they were trying to get reparations through the courts, I know that obtaining reparations is a political vehicle. The only way that we will ever get them is through politics. We will never get them through the court system in this country. So if, in fact, reparations is one of the cornerstones of what you're trying to do, turning off a segment of a voting bloc that you need in order to be able to get the political heft to put the subject on the table doesn't seem very wise to me. So, what do you think we can do to bridge these diaspora wars? That's what we'll call them, because if the foundational Black Americans don't want anything to do with Africa, and got into a debate and I said, well, if you're going to be angry at the Somalians in Minnesota for voting for Trump, well, get mad at Byron Donald, get mad at Tim Scott, get mad at Candace Owens. I don't see you doing anything to them, but you're hopping mad about the Somalians who, some of them, I think the same way Byron Donald, Candace Owens, Tim Scott, I think that Trump supporters come in two brands, Uncle Tom's and opportunists, or both.
Yeah, it's true.
So I don't see that there's, tell me if you think that perhaps those Somali immigrants in Minnesota that decided to support Trump, how you see them.
Well, I'm a reader on Malcolm X. I love Malcolm. When Malcolm categorized Black people as house Negro and a field Negro, I've always, even when I went back to Somalia and look at the politics, that comes back to me. Malcolm was never a liar. Malcolm was a truth teller. And Malcolm was also a lover of America, and history will dictate that. Those guys who are supporting Trump, the Somalis, are basically house Negroes. Like you said, is an opportunist. They just want to look good on television, get some coins. That's it. Their history ends right there. It does not go beyond that. And it is small. For Black people to have any respect, I'm a believer that Africa must rise. You do not see a Chinese person being disrespected in this country because China is very powerful. You do not see Japanese that happening to. You do not see Singaporean. You see Yemenis being disrespected because Yemen is poor. But you do not see UAE. You do not see Kuwait. You do not see Saudi Arabian. They're all kingdoms. They're not democratic states. They're authoritarians. Right. Why are they not being disrespected? Because their countries are powerful. They have money. For Africa, a Black life in America to have respect, Africa must rise. And Africa is capable of rising. And if you're a Black person and you're not thinking Africa, I feel bad for you. Because the Chinese are going there and making money. But you should be there.
Right. On that note, I do have a follow-up question as we move to our close, but let's take a break and pay some bills. We're back, and so Boyah, I fully agree that if you understand anything about Pan-Africanism, we here in America are tied as close to Africa as a brother, as a sister, the success of Africa means that we likewise have success here in this country because we at least got somewhere to go.
True.
My question is, there are 54, some say 55 countries in Africa. There is a move afoot to one Africa. I believe Gaddafi was one of the proponents of having one Africa, one currency, creating infrastructure so that Africans can work in more than one country and get from country to country. I mean, I was in Ghana, I was in Senegal, I was in South Africa, and I realized that the difficulty of getting, you need a visa to get, Africans need visas to get to some of these countries that I could travel freely. Getting rid of some of the colonial hurdles that have been placed for Africans never to have one Africa, how do you think that will be accomplished?
Your knowledge is needed. The diaspora who are knowledgeable shall go there. If you're not going to work there, at least make a visit and see and learn and connect. And whatever you can do to help, we need knowledge. Knowledge is what made America beautiful and strong and prosperous. If you look at this country and what kind of immigrants we attract, a lot of them are knowledgeable people, hardworking human beings. That's what makes this country great. And now that the immigrants are being messed with, of course, Africa is the one place that a lot of people will go to. And so Africa might benefit from what's happening now. What Trump is doing right now, actually, the rest of the world is celebrating because they're getting knowledgeable people back in their countries.
Right.
So if I'm a knower of what I know, I'm a survivor of war. I know peace and I know war, but I do not know racism or psychological warfare. What's happening in America to Black people, to immigrants, is a psychological warfare. It's not a real war. It's not something that I was trained to confront, because psychological warfare is like you don't even know. Hypocrites smiling for you, but are actually trying to destroy your life. There is
Right,
not much. It's hard to win a war like that. We
right.
can try.
So I want to touch on that. In your country, to smile in your face and stab you in the back, I take it that that is the height of disrespect. And how would you all deal with it in Somalia?
Well, that's why Somalia is not settling because we don't have that culture. If I don't like you, you will see me.
Mhm.
I don't have to hide. I'm not. I don't. I'm not a hypocrite. Hypocrite, they say, goes to the lowest level of hellfire. We have
Mm,
one base. If I like you, I like you. I'll die for you. I'll protect you. If I don't like you, then I'll tell you I don't like you. So there's no hypocrisy in poetry, those national poet. They don't have that.
right.
We don't practice hypocrisy. That's the reason why it took me many years to understand the American psychology or the American mindset, especially in Massachusetts, a liberal state of Massachusetts, where everyone is so nice to you, but you really do not know what's happening to your life until it's too late.
As an outsider looking in at African Americans, what would you say is our biggest shortcoming?
I think exposure. I always tell young people to travel. See, your life is not just in the hood or in your neighborhood or even in America. Your life is beyond that. Expose yourself. Go to furthest you can go from America. Experience some life. Come back, then you have a brand new life. Go to Mongolia. Forget about Africa and see how the Mongolians live and how they did the conquest half of the world, Genghis Khan. Go to Africa in Mombasa, Kenya, and see how ancient that city is. America is a pretty young country. You explore the whole world belongs to you. That's what I would tell an African American child. The whole entire world belongs to you. You teach the world about music, culture, fashion, struggle. The strugglers now in Africa or a remote area of the world is carrying Malcolm's face, Malcolm's words. Your culture is the, the soft power of America is about the African American
Mhm.
culture because who projects American culture? The soft power, music. Michael, what I thought was a brother from Somalia when I was younger.
Michael Jackson?
Uh, Michael Jackson,
Mhm.
Muhammad Ali. I really thought because he has Muhammad, which is Muslim name, he was actually from my neighborhood.
Right.
But in American power that is projected throughout the world, the soft power, which is far reaching than the hard power is the weapons. The far reaching one is carried by the African American culture. So
Mhm.
instead of America appreciating these people carry the soft culture, it doesn't do that. So what I would say is know your power, know your history, travel, see the world.
I wanna tell you, America Made Me a Black Man is a excellent read. It is a book that is poetic in its detailing of what it's like. I think you capture the experience of what it is like to be an African American, even a native born African American. You have been able to capture the essence of what we experience, and anyone who really wants to know and wants a book that reads it's nonfiction, but it reads like fiction because of your colorful use of words, your poetic artistry in writing. I want to thank you so much for coming on to the Ryles Report because you, my brother, tell it like it is. And thank you. Get the book, y'all.